I've never done it this way.
Well, you are owed it, and you too. So from here on out, everybody, if you're followers of the History Mystery Man channel, I'm sure you know both of these amazing guys, but for anyone on my channel who is not familiar with these two living legends, I would love for, let's start with Don. Would you give us some introductions, kind of who you are and what you've accomplished in life?
Don Radebaugh, born in the 50s. That says something, huh? And you, Darrell, were born in the
48.
Wow, right after World War II. Anyway, I got into the maritime industry through my stepfather, who was a Great Lakes tug captain, who later became a Great Lakes pilot. He, right out of high school, my first job out of high school was the 150-foot James A. Hanna tug, and we pushed and towed oil barges all over the Great Lakes. For me, it was just going to be a summer thing, and I was going to try it out. I didn't know it would grow into 12 years on the lakes, but that's what happened. I did eventually get my license. Went to a seamanship school in Piney Point, Maryland, and I got my tug license and became a tug captain, a relatively young one for that era. I was 21 when I got my license. And bing, bang, boom, 12 years flew by, and before I decided to jump ship and so to speak, and go in a different direction. But I always viewed it as sort of a lot of, there were boring moments filled with moments of terror for me. We worked all year round, spring, summer, winter, and fall. I worked on an icebreaker. We broke ice all winter, which is kind of unusual because the Great Lakes shipping industry shuts down in the wintertime. Well, we didn't. We worked out there all winter. We talk about the gales of November. They're not a lot better in February either, let me tell you, and a lot colder too. So it was a very trying experience. I'd never want to go through it again, but through it all, I'm really glad I did it. It helped shape the man I am today. So fortunate for that. And I think Darrell's story is even more interesting.
It was a dark and stormy night.
We've already heard that one, Darrell.
My family's been sailing since 1939.
Darrell Walton, by the way, Captain Don, Captain Darrell. Both of those titles for these men. Anyway, continue.
Nice to meet everybody out there in TV land. Yeah, so my family, I've been going down to the docks since I was a little kid. When I was, about 7, we took a trip on the Armco. My dad was first assistant engineer. We went from Toledo to Silver Bay and then back. Obviously unloaded on the way up. They loaded a taconite and then all the way back. Boy, that was something for a kid. I mean, I used to get off going to Cedar Point. I just loved the Mary Woo, but this thing was the real deal, see. So it was then the old man just kept raising up, and he finally became chief engineer. And he was chief. The most valuable chiefs are the ones who were qualified on all the different boats. So if somebody went on vacation here, this chief could come over here because the first assistant had his chief's license, so they could fill in right there. So Columbia Transportation Company used to have about 15 different boats sailing. And my Uncle Claude sailed on the old Howard M. Hanna. He got my dad the job at Columbia Transportation. My dad got my Uncle Grant, who went down on the Fitzgerald. He got him the job. Uncle Grant got his kid, Alan Walton, who went through the same storm. He was either on the Wolverine or the Roche that night. And my brother Tom sailed, I sailed, my brother George sailed, and my brother Kim was shipkeeping for a while. So we've been hanging around the lake since 1939. And we've all retired, and I met him through the ferry boats down in Toledo. And a little paddle wheel riverboat, the Arowana Princess was called. He not beautiful boat, but vastly underpowered. Was those 453s in there or 671s?
I have no idea. All I know is they didn't make enough power when you got sideways in the wind.
No kidding. But then the Arowana Queen came in. I helped deliver that around Nova Scotia. It came from, I think it was Somerset, Massachusetts, Rhode Island up there somewhere. That was a real trip, taking an ocean voyage. And I tell you what, to this day, I will say never will I ever complain about the price of lobster, seeing what these people go through to get them. I don't care if it's $100 a lobster. These dudes need every penny they can get. But then we start taking trips out to South Bass. In fact, Don and I run our first trip in 35 years, was it? The very first time we went to Put in Bay, the Arowana Queen. I think it was you and me.
Yeah, that was back in probably 1985-ish.
Yeah. And so we carried on the tradition. There was a lot of ferry boats used to leave out of Toledo to go over to Detroit. There was all these ferry boat lines go all over the Great Lakes. So to me, it was important to carry on the family tradition, but I did not want to be gone from March until Christmas, like my dad was. We grew up basically without a dad until he got on the ore boats where he'd get in every 5 days. See, so then we got to know him a lot better, and with the ferry boats, you got to go home every night, so that was pretty good. And but as I got older, and on the Jet Express boats out of Port Clinton, there, beautiful boats. My goodness gracious, they're all fly-by-wire stuff, you know. And as long as everything worked, it was beautiful. But back and forth, 17 trips a day. And if it was rough out there, man, you get older, your knees, you can't do this no more, you know, just rocking and rolling for hours on end. So the day came when I said, that's it, we're going to do something else. And retired from that. Well, actually, I worked for Towboat US for a little bit. But anyway, retired. And no, I had also worked for the railroad for 14 years. See, I could work the railroad during the summertime. I'm sorry, in the wintertime. But in the summertime, we're going to jump on a boat. There's always coal miners going on strike, longshoremen going on, so it'd get laid off. So I was able to do both, and thank God for that, because I got a halfway decent pension from the railroad, and otherwise I wouldn't be driving that Lamborghini you see sitting out there. But it's been a good run, and I'm glad Don got a hold of me and kind of reignited the whole thing, and I started delving into my archives. I've got all these books and interviews and stuff I've read. And
so you now as well, you have a relative who went down on the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Yeah, my Uncle Ralph Grant. His Uncle Grant. To me, it was always Uncle Grant. His name was Ralph Grant Walton, Sycamore, Ohio. They tell you Fremont. He lived in Fremont anymore than a man in the moon. I think he had a P.O. box there. But he's from Sycamore. And there were so many sailors from Sycamore. And, you know, just they've carried on the tradition. And in fact, my Uncle Claude went through a bad storm right there at Whitefish Point, to the point where he was cold passing the engine room, and the boat lurched and threw him up against a bulkhead, and he cut his tongue so bad that when they got to the Sioux, they couldn't stop it, so he had to get off and go to the hospital. I can't envision sewing your tongue up. I just don't even want to think about that. But then he got back on, he finished the season. That's the same year my dad started sailing, so 1939. So, and 36, 38 years, something like that. My brother Tom sailed on the Fitz, and I can remember being a 11-year-old kid. Dad and Tom's on the Fitzgerald, and they'd come into port, and they were always standing at the railing right there. And they'd wave, and then they'd get off the boat to go home for 2 or 3 hours. Well, one time, a couple of times, ain't nobody on that railing. Mom would wait 20 minutes, go up there and go get them. So up the ladder I go, and I knew where Dad's chief engineer's room was on the Fitzgerald. So I'd go, if he wasn't there, I knew he was down in the engine room. And Tom, if he wasn't in the galley because he was a porter, he was somewhere close. So I got to kind of run around the Fitzgerald as much as I wanted. That was good. Had I known then what I know now, I wouldn't have. Where'd Darrell go? Everybody seen Darrell? Where'd Darrell go? Oh, he was heading for the pilot house last time I saw, you know.
Awesome. Well, these are some priceless moments here, and thank you for the introductions. Don, I'd like to ask you, so you've been doing this channel now for how long? You've done it for?
If I look at the analytics, it says I started the History Mystery Man channel in 2016, but
okay.
I started it then, but I didn't do anything with it. It just laid there, and I did nothing. I created the channel and did nothing, but I didn't really get going in earnest till about, I would say, 2021 is when I really started feeding it all my attention and focus to try to grow it, you know.
So where you're at now, when you two started doing, let's say, your first video to where you've reached 33,000 subscribers, you guys have brought so much attention to the Edmund Fitzgerald story. You've talked about the Bradley, you've talked about the Morel, you've you know, and we'll talk a bit about those and any other vessels we come up a little bit later. But how has that, first with you, how has this journey, so to say, impacted you just in
Well,
a with Darrell and going to Whitefish and maybe the festival? How has this grown you in a better way or given you a different outlook in ways that, you know, you're not the same anymore?
well, it taught me that my fascination with the Edmund Fitzgerald, it's not just me. I learned that people have a fascination with the story of the Edmund Fitzgerald, not only in America, but I'm hearing from people from all over the globe, you know, um, and that's, you know, strictly because of Gordon Lightfoot's song that traveled the world. So everybody knows about the Edmund Fitzgerald. Yeah, there are what estimates 6 to 8 thousand boats laying on the bottom of the Great Lakes, but the one that garners the most attention is the Fitzgerald. And I found out that there is worldwide fascination with it. It's been a really interesting ride. Sometimes I feel bad that we give the Fitzgerald so much focus. It's what people want. It's what brings the numbers on YouTube. But you know, there are 25,000 sailors who have lost their lives over the decades, centuries now, on the Great Lakes, who deserve the attention too.
They're
But
29 bells.
yeah,
In a sense.
absolutely. But it's the Fitzgerald that it's what people want. It's the Titanic of the Great Lakes, the story.
Yeah. How would you say? Thank you for that. How would you say, Darrell? This is just meeting with Don here.
Well, he
rehashing stuff.
Yeah, he sparked a new interest that I had. You know, it was a family tragedy, and I saw how it tore my dad up. I mean, he lived another 8.5 years, but he was never the same because he knew the problems that Fitzgerald had, and he got my brother, or his brother, my Uncle Grant, the job. But he did not know that Uncle Grant had bumped onto the Fitzgerald because he was on, I think it was the old Ogilvy. That was in September. Something happened to the boat. They laid it up. So with his seniority, he bumped on the Fitz. And in fact, they were at anchor on the St. Mary's River with both anchors down. This is November 10th now. He's on the reserve, chief engineer. Both anchors down in the St. Mary's River with the engines running at half speed just to sit still. And at 7:10, he said that big gigantic gust of wind came right around there, and they had to reset the anchors, and they had to annotate that in the engineering log. So the next morning, it started dying out in a few hours. The next morning, they go out and join the rest of the ships looking for either survivors or debris or whatever. And I think it was around noon or so they got released, and they went up to Silver Bay. And they didn't have cell phones in those days. They didn't have any way other than ship to shore. Dad he didn't want to pay the high buck for that, so he'd go down to the dock phone. And he called Mom and he says, "Well, I made it." And she says, "Well, I got bad news. Your brother was on the Fitzgerald." And that was it. The balloon busted right there. He lost, from that moment on, he lost all love of sailing, and he couldn't hardly handle it. He says, I'll have to call you back. I got to digest this. It's too much, you know, as he knew all the problems that boy, he kept it to himself. So now he's feeling responsible. Well, he should have said something. Well, you don't, back in them days, buddy, you do what they tell you, or you're gone and your pension's gone and everything else is gone, you know.
A lot different then than it is today.
You talk to people that sail in a boat, they'll say the same thing. Mike Capser, I never saw a boat bend the way that thing bent. Because it didn't have the bulkheads the rest of them did, see? So it was a new design, and it didn't work. 17-year-old boat, that should have survived. Look at the rest of them. They were built a lot older than that.
The Anderson's 1953.
Yeah,
what was till a year ago was sailing. So
I said the Jackson was built, but Fitzgerald's Hull 301. I think the Jackson was 302, and the
Homer.
The Homer was
303.
Yeah.
Not to mention the Alpina. That's the oldest right now, still out in the lakes. The Alpina, 49 was that? I think she was built 1949.
That's a really. I love that. That's a cool boat. But I love the Alpina.
Bulkheads, you see. So somebody, even the architect, I forget his name right now, I can look that up. He said, you got to have bulkheads in this boat, transfers bulkheads. Well, we want this great big, humongous bathtub looking thing to make it easier to load and unload. Well, hello, you know, it's kind of, you can go up to skyscrapers and you can feel these things, you know, leaning with a boat, by God, especially when you're hauling 26,000 tons of taconite. And it just, as I performed here one time, I took a coat hanger and bent that old coat hanger, a metal coat hanger, until she snapped, and it was hot. You could see the steam come up. There's that thick, there's steel on these boats are an inch thick.
Yeah.
I mean, you could hit them with a ball peen hammer all day. You ain't going nowhere. And to see those hatch cover clamps that they showed pictures of, all distorted, the ones on the corners, but the rest of them look just fine. Gee, what's that tell you? They weren't all clamped down. I don't care what anybody says. They weren't.
Yeah.
They couldn't have been. But yet Bernie Cooper was saying, hey, we got the hatch cover crate's completely underwater. Well, how come he didn't get any water down in the doggone holes? See? So, nah.
Did you mention in the previous interview about the Wilfred Sykes as well for any comparisons with the Fitzgerald? I'm going off of memory as well, because I got to see the Wilfred Sykes.
Not so much in terms of comparisons. I use the Homer as a comparative example because it was, for all intents and purposes, the sister ship of the Fitzgerald. They loved the Fitzgerald so much. When the Fitz was built in 58, they turned around the next year in 59 and built the Homer. But as time would go on, the Homer began to experience structural issues, the same loose keel problem that the Fitzgerald. It was the Fitzgerald all over again. Now the Sykes is attached to the story because it survived the same storm. I know they hid behind Isle Royale. The Sykes did, but construction-wise, I don't know that it's comparative to the Fitzgerald. Only that it's a big part of the story because it was out there that day.
Now, I'll do another split question. Do you think previously with the Bradley going down, then the Morel going down, those two were sheesh? If you look into those stories, the Bradley, 33 was it?
That sounds about right.
And then the Morel with Dennis Hale and how that other half just kept going for some time. Do you think anything could have been done? Because those were big boats too. Do you think anything, hey, Fitzgerald, maybe we should, or do you think they just didn't care? Like, hey, just keep plowing along.
Those are riveted boats, don't forget.
Yeah.
And you can read those stories by people who sailed on them, and you go down after a bad storm and pick up rivet heads by the 5-gallon bucketful, okay? Yeah. In fact, the big joke with some of them old boats, they kept broom handles aboard. So, cut a broom handle, put it in that hole, stop the leaks, we'll fix it later, typical big business type stuff. Broom handles are pretty cheap, really, but it didn't do no good for them. And once again, all this is supposed to be the last run for the year, and they just came across some storms that were.
Because it's infuriating. It's like you didn't learn. You keep sending these guys out for that one final push, that one final. Brother Rick Mixter has, a lot of times, you get it. These are people's livelihoods. There's I guess there's like an image where that you want twirling mustache, evil corporate overlords that want to push them out there, right, for greed. But then at the same time, how much is it that these guys got to do what they got to do?
I mean, corporate America. Their goal is to turn a buck. I can't fault them for wanting to show enormous profit at the end of the year. That's what they do. I don't know that the story of the Bradley and the Morel is in any way near the Fitzgerald, because maybe they had structural issues. I don't know. But we know for a fact that the Fitzgerald had structural issues. Mm-hmm. So then why do we keep pushing for more and more and more? And of course, because of these structural issues, she was to go to dry dock that 75, 76 season, but they never got there. So it's tragic all the way around. But I think the Fitzgerald stands alone in terms of the way they pushed her. And what do you say? Ride them hard and put them away wet, or
rode hard and put away wet. That's stockholders. You see, this is a capitalistic country, and you buy low and you sell high. They would buy they'd ship the tacknite for the steel mills, And when I worked the railroad, it took hours and hours and hours to unload the Fitzgerald because the Hewletts had to go down there and do it. They didn't have self-unloading booms, and the crew, a lot of these ships, they'd come out to our house because we lived 15 minutes away from the docks, and they'd bring 3 or 4 cases of beer with them and sit around the kitchen table. It was always neat for me because I was a 9-year-old bartender, you know. Barkeep, you know.
Can't get away with that today now, huh?
Oh no, well, but inevitably there was somebody I'd bring a bottle of something. I learned to mix highballs that way when I was 9 years old. But these dudes would drink. There's a lot of them World War II veterans. See, you ain't gonna tell a World War II veteran who went through pure hell that you can't have a drink. Well, he'll throw you over the side. It's that simple. But the Fitzgerald changed all that because I said this before. It was a clean boat. It was a nice boat, and there was a lot of partying going on back in them days. I can tell you that just for the ships I was at W.C. Richardson. Oh man, the old heads were drinking their Irish coffee. You know, like I said, the kids are going behind the smokestack. They're doing a doob or two there. You know, and it all worked. The work got done, and it was a good time until the Fitz went down, and then it all changed. And all of a sudden, you got to start whizzing in a cup, you know, and all this and all that. So I don't know. It's corporate America is, and I know the country's got some problems. I know we're still the greatest country in the world because capitalism that's what it is. You buy low and you sell high. You know, everybody has a chance to have a job, and if you do the job, you can keep the job. But if you can't do the job, you're gonna, you know, hit the bricks here. And I remember I was staying on the Steelton. There were times when I remember they fired 2 guys because they show up drunk. You couldn't show up drunk to your job. Now, when you get off work, if you want to go have back in your stateroom and have a highball or something or a beer, that's one thing. But you ain't gonna show up. Well, I got a wheelable. You know, that ain't gonna work. You're gone, pal. So it ain't like they condoned everything. Yeah. But as far as the Fitz not having all those hatch covers down is it's just the way it was. I think Rick Mixter himself said, out of all the pictures he's seen, the Fitz, only 1 or 2 of them had all the clamps down. Most of them on the corners and maybe one in the middle. Don't want to pay overtime. Ooh, Fitz went out on Sunday. You know, they'd want to pay the overtime. You know, money talks and you know what walks. It's that simple.
Yeah, I mean, I have looked online and all the video of the Fitzgerald underway in weather, whether it's video or stills. There, yes, you're right, Darrell. There are so many photos of the Fitz underway with the hatch clamps just laying there undone, which was not uncommon. You know, if it was a beautiful, calm day and they knew there was no immediate weather in the area, they're not going to tell the deckhands 21 hatches as it was on the Fitz, 68 clamps per hatch. That's a lot of clamping down, you know. If it just wasn't necessary, it wasn't necessary. But I've also seen a lot of pictures of the Fitz, still pictures and video where the clamps are all clamped down. I mean, I can. So this works both ways. I can't believe. I know, as you believe, they weren't all clamped down. I can't believe Captain McSorley, who was at 31 the youngest master on the Great Lakes, who would go on to captain 10 different boats over his career. I mean, he was a smart guy.
These
you know,
aren't greenhorns.
He was the most experienced captain on the Great Lakes. I know when they left Superior November 9th, it was unseasonably calm, a beautiful warm summer day. It wasn't summer, but it sure appeared as one. Temps in the 70s, very little wind. But they did know that gale warnings were up and coming, and gale warnings that would increase to storm warnings. And they did have much of the western half of Lake Superior to have calm weather to go out and fasten those clamps. I mean, I can't believe a captain would go out into November with gale warnings up, despite the calm weather they were having at the time, and not clamp them down. I know could be an overtime thing, but if I'm the captain, I know damn well we got time, we got the right weather for this. Let's get this thing clamped down. We're heading into a gale, maybe worse. I can't believe for one moment that McSorley would have said, "Don't worry about it. I don't want to pay the overtime."
Yeah.
More than they don't want to pay overtime, they want to live.
That makes me think of the John J. Bolin Jr. that sank in Lake Erie. That they had coal spilling out on the decks, and they ain't closed. And Eric Petkovic, he did a great book on that. I'll show you guys that book too. The Bolin, tiny little Lake Erie, and they head out. We don't need to close the hatch covers. We got coal spilling out onto the deck, and wind and waves start going, and 4 guys go down on it. It finally capsized into Lake Erie, and that changed a lot with the Boland. I forget what year it sank, but it was tragic, and you know what happened again with that. Those hatch covers are important.
Well, the Sylvania used to run from Toledo to Monroe Power Plant, and she'd leave port in there. There were no hatch covers shut. The coal was mounted up like this, you know, because they had to haul so much, you know. But good buddy of mine was he worked down in the engine room. I think it was an oiler at the time. He sailed with me shortly, as did Captain Mike Capser. And he told the story where they leave Chicago, and it's blowing. I mean, you shouldn't even think of leaving the dock. But man, we're going to go anyway. He got out there about a mile to it. He says, we made a serious error in judgment. And when he turned that boat to come back, they said that the whole crew said, I've never seen a boat heel that far. The riding moment, it's called, you know. And finally, she came back down, and Mike Capps himself said, I thought that was it. We're done, because this boat's going to flip right over, and that's all she wrote. So McSorley he's going to go no matter what. You know, that's the way he was, and then he put a whole career in that way. But that last trip, buddy, he shook that dice, and they came up snake eyes, and that's a real shame.
Well, let's say, so you guys have both definitely check out all of History Mystery Man's videos. They have covered the Fitzgerald in ways that I love it. It's engaging. You guys you bring in records and accounts and stuff in these prior videos. You know, I don't want to tread in your territory going in too deep with that. I
go for it.
You guys brought this attention, and I want everybody to get
Darrell brought me things I never knew about. Like, you know, he first introduced the idea of the world that there were spare prop blades laying on the deck of the Fitzgerald. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And which could have caused great damage in the big sea if one got loose. And so and the fact that they just had repaired and replaced blades of the Edmund Fitzgerald shortly before it went down. I didn't know that. There were cracks in the blades. I didn't know that. And
can I show you something?
Probably cracks from vibration that, you know, so he brought a lot to the table that I never knew.
The pictures of the original report from the Coast Guard, they're drawings of the photographs they took, and the prop plate was right here, but the stern's upside down. And you'll look, this is where Rick Bixter and I disagree. If you see the bottom of this ship, there's a big crease goes all the way down like this, but it came down from up here. He said, well, that bottom thing is because of the grounding. They ground it out several times, which they did, but that wouldn't explain why there's a big crease up here. And I'll look to see if I've got that picture. And that is when I'm almost positive that blade came loose and could have seriously punched a hole in those side tanks.
I think when it hit the shoals, when it coming back down,
well, I don't know if that's when it happened, but because it was up around Metropolitan Island there that they started having trouble. Yet, according to Deadly Picard, did I say it right?
Pretty close.
Okay.
Closer than
6 years it's taken me. I still can't get it right. Anyway.
That's close as he ever got.
I know. He heard him talking and Mitchell had to check back his speed by half because it was working so much. He said, I've never seen this boat work like this. Well, maybe that is when the prop plate fell over and he's taking on water. And if you got all the water, even in the engine room, because if you had seals that were broken or leaking because they didn't rebalance the prop 2 weeks earlier when they were changed it, the water from the engine room had to be pumped onto the cargo. You weren't allowed to pump it over the side. It was piped that way on purpose. You'd have to break everything down and change it. And if you're hanging on like this for dear life, you're not going to worry about breaking pipes down. Pump that on the cargo hold. You know, she's getting lower and lower and lower, and she just lost positive buoyancy. Whether or not, if ever I hit the lottery, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to rent me a big boat, and with a magnetometer, and go right up all the way back past Caribou Island, and look for that spare prop blade, because that would show up like a sore thumb. You know what I'm saying? A big piece of metal. These things weigh tons.
Yeah.
And a magnetometer should be able to find it. That would prove that blade came off. Because the stern's upside down, you can't tell if the blade's there or not.
Right.
Well, my point was, I didn't know ships kept spare prop blades on their decks at
Oh, yeah,
all.
they all do,
That
yeah.
was new for me.
Most
so.
of them are in the back here. That's where they start. The reserves was there. The Armco's was there. But the Fitz was on deck there.
Yeah.
And boy.
So yeah, McSorley was a heavy weather captain. We all know that. That's was that the reason the Fitzgerald went down? I don't know. I don't like to throw shade at McSorley's way because I admired him so much. The youngest master ever on the Great Lakes at 31. His career spanned 44, 45 years. He captained 10 boats. Yes, he was a heavy weather captain. Maybe he took unnecessary risks and chances at time. He certainly wasn't known for checking back or altering course. And that's the irony of this whole thing with the Fitzgerald. He wasn't known for backing off the throttle or changing course, but he did both that day. Wait a minute, let's hug the northern shore before we make our southern descent. Hey, I'm going to check back because vibration or whatever was going on. So the two things he wasn't known for, he did that day. And had he made just coming out of Superior, Wisconsin and made a beeline, which would be 2 tracks down to Whitefish Bay, it would have cut 14, 15 hours from the journey. That's the part that gets me every time. They would have made it.
Right.
If McSorley would have only done what he always did, don't change course and full ahead. Beeline for Whitefish Bay, they're there. They're going to get there. But the fact they added 15 hours to this trip is what ultimately did them in. It's so ironic to me that it happened that way.
The Weather Bureau gave them bad info. Bad info.
Well,
they really did, because they'd have made it. But instead, they ended up going right in the teeth of the storm. So those two low pressure systems converged.
The Three Sisters, they finally hit them.
When they turned it, I think that's because they hit the Anderson.
You've pointed out too many times there could be, and I've talked with Mixter on this too. There could be a variable that none of us accounted for. That like, unless we were there, like you've said many times, unless you were a fly on the wall watching the events play out, there could be a totally, let's say, left field that
nobody thought of.
And nobody would have thought of, nobody would have even thought could happen. It could be a totally, freak accident type thing.
It would be yet one more variable to add to the mix, because right now it's like, well, did it break in half on top of the water, or did it break when the bow struck the bottom? Did it go aground near or at Caribou Shoal, if there's even such a thing, or not? There are so many different scenarios and variables that we don't know what to think. I always come back to when people ask me what I think happened to the Fitzgerald. It's a crummy answer, but I really don't know, and that's my belief that we'll never know what exactly happened to it. I believe what I believe in terms of grounding and such, but I preface everything with I don't really know because I wasn't there.
Many different theories, my good man. The Paul, what's his name, Hanalot theory about the
Hanalt theory, is it?
Yeah.
It could have went aground at Superior Shoal much earlier.
Right.
That's another theory, that there is a Superior Shoal out in the middle, just I think southeast of Isle Royale.
Mm-hmm. Where right on their track where he went.
We're right on their track, where some believe that it went aground there, which added structural damage, and and then water started coming in a lot sooner than we all knew. So
who was it that said that?
Paul, I think his name is, don't hold me to the fire on this, but Paul Hainault.
Right, I've got Paul Hainault. That's correct.
Hainault, he's got his own theory. You can Google that, Paul Hainault. I don't know the spelling. HANNA. AULT, something like that.
Did you once say, though, that these hadn't been mapped in how many years, these shoals? Because it should.
Well, they were working with older charts. We know that date back to the early 1900s that were not accurate.
Right.
And don't forget, Mark Twain, they got a piece of lead, with a rope. Oh, okay, that's how deep this is. They didn't have electronics in them days. Gee, don't you think you should have upgraded these things long ago? They had depth finders back in World War II.
Now, what's a sensible reason why they just nobody got around to it?
The Fitzgerald did not have a depth finder, is what you're getting at?
Well, like you saying, how come nobody thought, hey, we should probably get these up to date a bit, like...
I don't know. It's a mystery as to why the Fitzgerald did not have a fathometer, but I don't know that it would have saved it on that terrible day, that terrible night. But we do know that after the Fitzgerald, everybody had a fathometer.
It changed, yeah, a lot.
That Superior Shoal is 300 meters from the bottom of Lake Superior, and it comes to within 15 meters of the surface. So that's 45 feet. And if you're drawing 27 feet, but you're in 25-foot waves, is there a chance you could have poked a hole on the top of that? I mean, this thing is like Mount Everest in the bottom of Lake Superior. It's a great big mountain. And if it was me, and I'd been in charge all those years, on every chart I'd have put a big circle with the phrase, there be dragons here, don't go near this, stay away from it, And so could that have happened? This guy, Paul Howard, seems to think that's where she started taking on water. When did McSorley start checking back? Was it right after there? That's up to, and then a little bit farther, then they come down by Metropolitan. It's not like that Superior Shoal is clear out in the middle of Lake Superior. And if on Wolford Sykes, he's behind Superior Isle Royale, and he's, VHF radio back in the days, you're lucky to get 20, 25 miles and hearing it. So he had to be somewhere within there, and he's hearing the captain say, I got to check back because I've never seen this boat work like this. So to me, he was experiencing problems clear the heck out in the middle of Lake Superior. Can we handle it? Well, the boat's pumps, geez, I don't know. We're not getting ahead of it, Oh, man. I don't know, boys. I still say that prop blade, when it went over the side, and you can see, I'll see if I've got those drawings. Rick Mixter said, well, it's because they had been grounded out a couple different times. Well, that doesn't explain the side of the boat. They didn't ground the side of the boat. But that thing going over the side, and they put a couple holes more down there. And there's no bilge pump for the cargo hold. There's just only bilge pumps for the ballast tanks.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, you're taking more and more water, and man, what are you going to do? Beach it? There ain't no place to beach it in Lake Superior. You're kind of SOL there, you know what I'm saying?
You brought to my mind now. I think it may have been your most recent Fitzgerald video. Is it To Dive or Not Dive? Was it that one? All the controversy and politics aside from that, let's just say for a moment, somebody with the right clearance and all the check the box say, you can go and dive the Fitzgerald. This is a once in a blue moon. Do you think going and diving on it, I'm not saying we're going to, but all that, this is a huge hypothetical. What do you think we would find if we could, later this summer, somebody had it all checked out. They were, hey, Canadian government says you can go down. What do you think the state of the Fitz, I'll say the state of the Fitz currently, and then do you think that would bring a whole new lens to if they could get some more filmage around and more shots, or do you think maybe it's deteriorated and it might change?
Well, we don't know because we haven't seen it for decades. So it may be deteriorating. I don't know. I think Darrell thinks it's probably still yet in pretty good shape. But again, I come back to, yes, we can dive on the Fitzgerald, although it's not going to happen in the near future. Not that it couldn't, but we are never going to figure out what happened to the Fitzgerald. We can't put all those pieces back together. We know there's 200 feet missing in the middle where it tore apart, disintegrated, strewn about the lake floor of Lake Superior. But even if you could reassemble the Fitz some way and put all these puzzle pieces back together, I say that we will never, ever, ever know exactly what happened to the Edmund Fitzgerald. We love to think about it and wonder about it, and it's a great mystery, but I believe it's always going to stay one. So no matter, we can dive on it a million times, but we're never going to know exactly what happened to the mighty Fitz.
Thankfully for Lake Superior, the coagula mussels, the zebra mussels, there's, at least from everybody I've interviewed, there's little to none so far in Superior. So it should be, we should have the Fitz for still some time.
You can go on a Morel, you can go on a Bradley, and it still looks like a ship, And I've seen pictures of, the Fitzgerald is imploding upon itself. It's way too, don't give me that. Lake Superior, have you ever swim in Lake Superior? I'm telling you what, buddy.
It is brisk.
It's brisk, but it's so clear. It's like the Florida Keys. It's like perfectly clear. You can just see forever, And I think she'd still be in relatively good shape. I don't think it's all going to be collapsed on itself. But with today's forensic tools that they've got, I think Don made a good point. Technically speaking, they wouldn't have to dive on. He could use these submersible robot things.
Maybe get the logbook like you had mentioned a few times.
Right.
Would that provide information, or in the
right.
Fitzgerald is sinking, is somebody writing down as they're sinking? Like,
well, you bring up a good point.
No, man, they're clinging for dear life.
You bring up a good point. Those two guys, two Navy divers, keep that in mind. He's in the Navy. That the trimix, and it took about 20 minutes to get down there, and they only had like 6 minutes of bottom time or 8 minutes. Then it took them an hour and a half to come back up. Is there any chance at all that story is not maybe 100% accurate? And maybe they did get in there and get that logbook, and maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I don't know. And the door being supposedly dogged open. Well, like we've talked to plenty of people. I remember Wheeling and Joe France, the wind was howling like crazy right there at the Mackinac Bridge. You keep one of them doors open, because if they're both shut and somebody opens that door, every paper in that pilot hose got sucked right out. See, so you leave the door open a crack to equalize pressure. So, and on the backside, I talked to Rick Mixter about that. The door is like a kitchen screen door. It goes like, and it's locked. It ain't like dogging the whole thing's down. So when you say dogging the door down, it tells me she's dogged shut. There ain't no way of dogging it open other than that little clip thing that goes down like that. So was it wide open like that? That's what I'm saying. Let's get that camera right next to see. Is this thing locked like this? Could the divers have gotten in there and maybe had more than 6 minutes and grabbed a couple things? See?
Yeah.
And another thing, you look at some pictures, you can see the life jackets there and hanging from the ceiling. Yet supposedly this body has got the older style K-pop, like which they look like. If you watch the movie The Titanic, they got the older K-pop, yeah. And that's what I was told by when I talked to Mr. Shannon, Fred Shannon. I got to spend a couple hours with him. 20th anniversary of the Fitzgerald. He was a nice guy. I've spoken with his daughter recently. I plan on. She says she's going to come down and have a talk with us, so I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome! Are you going to be with that too, Don?
Oh well, yeah. We hope to have her right here.
If I'm still alive on the earth and breathing, hope to be here.
Oh, we're getting ready. You're in your prime. Both of you in your prime still.
Oh, we're in our prime, all right.
He's a tap dancer, so he should be around for quite a while.
I tease Mixer about that. You guys, all you guys here before me, you ain't going nowhere. We're not done with it yet. You
better hurry.